kind words of me. I think it was I who had said to Devon, well, what is there to celebrate today? And I'd said it quite cynically, because indeed and in fact, there is much to celebrate. As we mark the 71st anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the first international treaty that gathered together a body of rights to which all human beings are entitled, and which rights should be guaranteed not only by international law, but by domestic law. So today is a timely reminder to us, and sometimes I think that some of us forget that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, regardless of who you are or where you are in Jamaica. And I say that, of course, because today, whilst we acknowledge progress and advancement, we cannot help but remember that there are states of emergency across Jamaica and zones of special operations across Jamaica which have adversely impacted the rights of youth. And the theme today is Stand Up for Youth Rights. And it is against this background that I had said to Devon, well, what are we celebrating? But in the broader context, there is much to celebrate. And I think it is fitting that OPD was asked to participate in the Respect Tours that recognize that communities make a difference. Fitting because, as you know, in 2000, the Jamaican Parliament repealed the Ombudsman Act and replaced it with the Public Defenders Act. And in so doing, Parliament retained in the Public Defender all the features of the classical ombudsman, but at the same time added a new dimension to the Public Defender's portfolio. That is, the jurisdiction not only to investigate alleged acts of maladministration, but also allegations of the infringement and or likely infringement of a citizen's constitutional rights. And it is in that context in which we operate, and it is in that context that we wholeheartedly join with the National Family Planning Board and other stakeholders in the Respect Tour. The fact is that the Swedes have been credited for establishing the Ombudsman institution. Historically, however, there is evidence of the existence of ombudsman in ancient civilizations in China in 221 BC, equal in Korea, the Roman tribune during the Roman Empire, in ancient Turkey, India, Japan, and African societies. The Ombudsman institution in these societies had the function, very similar to ours, of monitoring the exercise of governmental power by officials to ensure that the exercise of such powers did not infringe the rights of citizens. The fact is that the Ombudsman institution has retained that essential characteristic. So in a nutshell, the Commission of Parliament, known as the Public Defender, was established to hold agents and officers of the executive arm of government accountable for any act of maladministration or any infringement or likely infringement of a constitutional right. The public defender is therefore a part of the check and balance mechanism in our society to keep the agents of the executive authority in line with the ethics of good governance. Through the power of investigations and reports to Parliament, OPD is able to offer protection to citizens from abuse, excessive or unfair administrative decisions. Through our office, the citizen has the right to complain, and that is a critical right. Where there is an allegation of whether maladministration or an infringement of right, and where that citizen has proved and we have established the facts that a right was violated or an act of maladministration was done, this citizen is entitled to redress, which sometimes is compensation. So oftentimes, especially in relation to our voice about detention of young Jamaican male, 22 being the most frequently occurring age, we are perceived as a voice of dissent, especially when asserting a view that is not the view of the majority. And there seems to be a commonly held view that democracy means that the majority view is always correct. The fact is that the majoritarian view, if accepted as the only view, turns democracy on top of its head, in that an essential and indispensable part of democracy has to be the embrace of diversity and has to be inclusive of all views. Dexter Diaz, Queen's Counsel, in speaking on the function of dissent in a democracy, eloquently stated, and I quote, "Dissent has a troubled history. The word dissent has often been a pejorative term. Dissenters have rarely been welcomed and are frequently viewed with suspicion, not only by the dominant power, but also by the majoritarian opinion. And yet, in a democracy, dissent is essential. It is indispensable to our freedom. In fact, it is one of the authentic voices of our freedom, particularly in times of exception, in wars, declared and undeclared, when freedom of the citizen is at stake, and particularly when the state itself seeks to curtail fundamental freedoms in the name of national security or economic development or whatever other perceived end worth pursuing." End of quote. The Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms created layers of responsibility for the protection and preservation of our rights. No longer is the government the sole guarantor of rights. This is now a shared responsibility with every member of the society and the community. It is a layered responsibility. In order to protect and preserve one's rights, each member of the community needs to have an appreciation of what rights belong to him, whether by virtue of being human being, and those rights which are protected under the Charter. Respectors gave OPD an opportunity to inform members of the community of their rights, an opportunity we would not ordinarily have had. And to National Family Planning Board and our stakeholders, we express our profoundest gratitude for this opportunity. From Bottom Road on August 16, 2019 to Barracks Lawn, Orocabessa, St. Mary on November 29, 2019, OPD did not miss one event. OPD reaffirms our commitment to the understanding that Kingston St. Andrew is not Jamaica and has never been Jamaica. Our work with Respector demonstrates the importance of going into communities to provide human rights education, health education to members of the community. Respector has to be hailed and bolstered for taking needed services to the community. Community education, whether about human rights or reproductive health, is critical in the development goal of our country. So too is the preservation of our environment and our environmental rights. OPDs develop lasting partnerships and friendships with other organizations providing equally valuable services aimed at bringing persons into full citizenship. This work has to be ongoing and more integrated in the communities. We close the year on a note that OPD is ready to start Respector 2020, God's willing. We have a duty to reach communities that they too can preserve for themselves and their generation fundamental rights and freedoms to which they are entitled by virtue of their inherent dignity as persons. Human rights, reproductive rights, environmental rights have to be discussed across the island, because that is how we build a democracy. We build a democracy through participation of communities in things that matter and shape their own lives. Communities need information in order to know their rights and to protect their rights. This Respector provided. The work is not only rewarding, but holds the prospect of encouraging community activism for the good of the community. Take, for example, dengue and this epidemic that so many of us have been afflicted by. It seems that there is need not only for sustained fogging and greater resources given to public health, but there is need for community participation in the prevention, monitoring, and control of dengue. Communities have to engage in a participatory and inclusive way to help the eradication of dengue. Many studies show that homes are often the source of breeding sites. In fact, some studies show that up to 40% of breeding sites are found in homes. This requires organization on the ground, not only from the top with some fogging. It requires the organization of communities in releasing their energies, in protecting their communities from dengue. We suggest that communities take action to protect themselves. And community participation is critical in encouraging behavioral changes. We require leadership on the ground. the right to enjoy a healthy and productive environment, free from the threat of injury or damage from environmental abuse and degradation of the ecological heritage, is one of the human rights protected by the Charter. Communities need to be particularly vigilant of this right and make it our business to know the developments that are planned for your community, that your voice can be heard in what kind of development communities want in their space. Very frequently, we hear all kinds of news, and news of events that are directly as a result of environmental abuse. And you know, it's all over the news. Algal blooms causing fish kill in the Kingston Harbor. That was carried in the Observer, December the 6th, 2019. And I use a quote from a scientist explaining what had occurred, and I quote, "There is at least 19 drainage systems that enters into the harbor, which carries nutrient-rich soil, water into the harbor, and here the temperatures fluctuate. But with high temperatures, it's possible that these nutrients from nutrient-rich water, being polluted water, nutrient-rich water is polluted water, which will see the proliferation or growth of these single-cell organisms that give the red color that we call algal bloom, that ultimately results in the killing of fish in our water because the oxygen level is too low. So the poor fish suffocate and die. The net result is death from a lack of oxygen. In August, again, we had a situation with the Outram River out in St. Mary that had turned red. Well, I who come from that part of the world never ever saw it red. But again, it was attributed to a thing called red tide. Again, another algal bloom. And of course, this one that was made much of in the news, where the banks of Windalco red mud storage had broken and effluent had spilled and had killed the fish down in the Rio Cobre. We also have a thing over time where we hear of strange smells developing, like what occurred at the Criminal Records Office that disrupted the entire events and processes at that office to the point where they had to relocate. The fact of the matter is that that list is not exhaustive because we continue to have fires at the Riverton dump and other fires that adversely affect our right to breathe healthy air. And that is not a privilege, but that is a right of every human being, whether it was provided for under the Charter or not. The point I make is that communities matter. It is where things happen. And they too have a role in holding government and government agents and officers accountable. They too have a role in shaping the community in which they want to live, the community which they want to preserve for themselves, and the environment they want. The time has come where community activism and organization is critical for our growth and critical for the development of our country. The fact of the matter is global warming, climate change. Those of us who are sensitive see and feel it happening all around. And we want to suggest on this final note that communities, whether you're a farming community, because the farmers are suffering. You don't get the rains when you ought to get the rains. You get too much rain when you're not expecting rain. And this is going to affect our food security. It is therefore critical that communities come together in preserving and protecting their own rights. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity and wish for all of us a day today when we reflect on our journey as a country, when we reflect on the rights that we have, in some instances fought for ourselves, in some instances secured by court order, and which way and how we go forward in that knowledge and certain knowledge that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. No one is less than the other. Thank you.